This is the intro to How to Bass. Look at the intro. Ooh, yeah, cool. Hi, I'm Seamless, and today is Saturday, which means I forgot to do a How to Bass yesterday. And today I'm going to teach you how to do this. So this is all about EQ modulation, or I guess filtering as well. This is more or less just a more compact idea of a whole bunch of filters. But I talked about this in relation to other sounds I've created using this technique and other stuff as well, but I haven't made a video just about EQ modulation. So that's what today is about. Anyway, the starting sound that I made is just really basic, just this thing. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to make a new one. I'm going to make a new stack from scratch. I just made this so that I can demonstrate what's up. But let's make a new one. So, I guess we'll take the MIDI. This is just some slide nodes around and sliding around doing cool stuff. It's not hugely complex. So, as this is referred to as EQ modulation, it's basically we're doing it with an equalizer. But what we're doing, you can do this without an equalizer. This is really just about filtering. We're really doing it ourselves with an EQ. So if you're wondering, there's not really much of a difference between EQ and a filter. Is that a filter is more like a purpose-built EQ that really can only do one specific thing per setting. And in this example, I'm going to make a bandpass. And 3 notch filters. And in this EQ, in parametric EQ2, notch filters are referred to as band stop. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make 3 band stop filters. Now I'm going to create automation clips for all 4 of these guys. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So now the top guy here is the bandpass filter, and these 3 are the notch filters. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make more or less completely random automation. I'm going to make more broad sweeping automation for the notch filters. And I'm also going to kind of try and make sure that they move sort of independent of each other. So they don't all like go down at the same time. Some of them go up, some of them go down, and like their peaks don't match, just so that there's more difference in movement between the 3 of them. Now, that's more or less it. But you hear that the sound is very weak and it's not quite as loud as the other one. And this is because after this step is I like to distort it a little bit. And then traditionally you would even out the sound by high passing it and then putting in a sub reinforcement. But I like to keep the sound with itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a Maximus to even out the frequencies that way with the multi-band compressor. So we're gonna look at. So this is the low end. You can see that it's just like utterly inconsistent. So we're just gonna crank it up. And so now the bass is a little bit more consistent. It's still not perfect, but it doesn't really need to be perfect because the bandpass is going up on higher frequencies sometimes. So it doesn't necessarily need to do that. Same thing with the mids, but not quite as hard. And then I'll just turn the compression off on the master and engage soft saturation so that it cuts off at 0 dB with extra distortion, which adds a little bit more bite to the sound. Now, in terms of the stack, typical processing using this technique doesn't usually end here. Sometimes it can, depending on the sound that you make. But with the sound this basic, I would recommend repeating the process so that I would put in another parametric EQ within the bandpass. And I would automate it against the other automation, but I wouldn't do exactly what the other bandpass was doing. I'll do some different movement so that while it's moving, there's movement underneath it that's a result of these guys that's creating the same Well, it's creating a new movement, because it makes it sound like the sound itself is more dynamic than it was originally. And of course, if you don't like what you're hearing in terms of like what automation is happening, you can always tweak the automation to reach somewhere that you want to get. It's difficult to really get a handle on like what movement creates what particular sounds until you just do a lot of these things, and then you get more of a general idea. But for the most part, just randomly putting stuff down, you're probably going to get something you like. Much like with the resampling process of using Harmor, when we make a sample, we put a whole bunch of stuff, together. You probably aren't going to use all of this just together in a continuous like phrase in a track. You'd want to have bits of it, the bits that sound good, and use those in the track as the best examples of the sound. That's not even in there anymore. Like I might just take it from here to here. And you can do that in a number of ways. You can either cut out the automation and only play the note up there, or you can just record it and then take out that one sample. And then, now that we've done this again, we want to distort it again. And compress it to even out the low end. One benefit of not using the master compression, having it on, is that it doesn't introduce delay when you don't have it active, so it's helpful. Also, this here, the LMH delay governs that style of attack delay that's on the master compressor for the 3 bands themselves. So like this value here is basically this value, but this value exists for all 3 of these bands. Sometimes you might want to actually put the Maximus before the distortion, because the distortion sometimes will behave differently when there's more low end being put into it. That's up to you. Now we do that with a relatively simple sound, like a relatively straight up, not very offensive Reese, but we could do more complex sounds that use the exact same process on it, and it would sound pretty interesting. So, for example, I'll make something kind of cool real quick. Do 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 do. That is not what I want. Let's take that exact same MIDI from the other guy. So literally the exact same EQ processing that we applied to the original sound did that to this whole new sound. So like this, usually when I want to come up with a more interesting bass, I'm thinking, okay, cool, this bass is nice. What kind of processing can I do to it? EQ modulation is pretty high up on the list of stuff I want to do to it. This is pretty similar to what will happen when you do Harmor sampling or something. Also, sometimes I might resample this. I'll just render it out and then resample it in Harmor, and that could be kind of cool. But this is a pretty good. You can do this with anything though. You don't need Harmor. You don't need this particular EQ. You can do this with any other EQ. You can also do it with just regular filters. Because like I said, this represents a bandpass filter, and then there's also just 3 notches. So and you can just run those like that. They don't necessarily have to be in any order either, because we're doing this in one EQ. It's happening all at once. And if you think about it, if you put a bandpass in between those 3 notches, the result is going to be the same. You can have them after the notches. You can have them before the notches. Doesn't matter. You need to have just a bandpass and some notches. 3, I use 3. You can use 9. It doesn't really matter. 9 might be overkill. So you can just have a bandpass filter, a notch filter, a notch filter, a notch filter. However your DAW does that, any DAW can do it, because this is pretty basic stuff. You might need to adjust the compression, like the multi-band compression, if you're going to just throw in any sound over an existing thing. But it's mostly about the actual movement of the individual EQs than it is the compression itself. Anyway, that's it. There's not going to be really two parts to this because this is pretty straightforward. Anyway, if you have any questions about any of this, let me know. And as usual, have a nice day. And now we're done with the video. Here is a link to 2 other videos and a bunch of stuff that's cool. Outro. Using it right. Yeah.